Have you ever noticed how exhausting it is to explain yourself to people who have already decided not to understand you? You explain your intentions. They question your motives. You explain your choices. They criticize your decisions. You explain your silence. They call you weak. Then one day, you realize something that changes everything. The people who truly care about you never needed an explanation, and the people demanding endless explanations were never looking for the truth. They were looking for control. Imagine a young man standing at the edge of a quiet mountain village. He had a dream that nobody around him could understand. Every morning before sunrise, he would leave his home and climb the mountain alone. The villagers laughed. "Where are you going? What are you trying to prove? Why can't you live like everyone else?" At first, he answered every question. He smiled. He explained his dream. He tried to convince everyone that one day his hard work would make sense. But every explanation created another argument. Every answer produced another doubt. Every conversation stole another piece of his confidence. One evening, after another day of criticism, he met an old monk sitting beside a river. The monk looked at him and asked, "Why do you keep explaining your path to people who have no intention of walking it?" The young man was silent. The monk smiled. "If a bird spends all day explaining to fish why it flies, it will never reach the sky." Those words changed his life forever. The next morning, nothing about the village had changed. The people still laughed. The questions were still there. The doubts were still loud. But something inside him had become quiet. For the first time, he simply smiled and kept walking. Days turned into months. Months turned into years. The villagers continued talking. Some called him arrogant. Some called him foolish. Others said he had failed because they could not see immediate results. But while they were busy talking, he was busy becoming. That is the difference between people who succeed and people who remain trapped. One spends life explaining. The other spends life building. Remember this. Your future is created by your actions, not by your arguments. Every minute you spend trying to convince the wrong people is a minute stolen from becoming the person you were meant to be. There comes a point where silence becomes more powerful than the perfect explanation, because results speak a language that opinions can never silence. So stop explaining yourself. Protect your peace. Protect your energy. The old monk picked up a small stone from the ground and gently dropped it into the river. The young man watched as the ripples spread across the water before slowly disappearing. The monk asked, "What do you see?" The young man replied, "I see the water changing because of a single stone." The monk nodded. Exactly. The stone never explained itself. It simply fell into the water, and its actions created the ripple. He looked directly into the young man's eyes. People who are busy creating ripples rarely have time to explain why they threw the stone. The young man stood there in silence. For years, he had believed that if he found the perfect words, people would finally understand him. But the monk had shown him a different truth. Understanding cannot be forced. Respect cannot be begged for. And acceptance cannot be earned by endless explanations. From that day forward, the young man made a decision. He would no longer waste his energy defending every choice. Instead, he would invest that energy into becoming better. Every morning before sunrise, while the village was still asleep, he climbed the mountain. The climb was difficult. The path was steep. The cold wind cut through his clothes. Some mornings he wanted to quit, not because the journey was impossible, but because loneliness is heavy. There is a special kind of loneliness that comes when nobody understands your vision, when your family questions your decisions, when your friends laugh at your discipline, when strangers think they know your future better than you do. That loneliness can make even the strongest person doubt themselves. But the monk's words echoed inside his mind. If they cannot see your destination, do not expect them to understand your journey. So he kept climbing, one step, then another. Not to prove the villagers wrong, but to prove to himself that his dream deserved a chance. Because deep inside, he finally understood something powerful. The strongest people in history were rarely understood in the beginning. They were questioned, ignored, mocked, and sometimes completely rejected. Yet they continued, not because they had everyone's approval, but because they had something more important, a reason to keep going. And sometimes, that reason is enough. The seasons began to change. The cold winds of winter slowly gave way to the warmth of spring. But the people in the village remained exactly the same. Every day, someone had a new opinion. Every day, someone had another reason why the young man would never succeed. Some laughed openly. Others smiled to his face but whispered behind his back. A few even pretended to support him, only to discourage him the moment doubt appeared. At first, those words still found their way into his heart. He wondered if he was making a mistake. He wondered if everyone else could somehow see a future that he could not. Then he remembered something the old monk had said.